Hi everyone. Over the last few weeks I've had a number of emails and questions asking about my particular approach to physical training and how it kind of relates to my traditional karate practice. So I thought what I'd do today is just share with you a combination kettlebell exercise that I use really in times where I haven't got that much time to train. Okay, now if you're like me and you're a busy person, sometimes it can be quite frustrating to get all your training sessions in during the week. And I tend to try and train. I've got a real variety of training methods. I use conventional, for resistance I use conventional weights, I use Bulgarian bags, kettlebells, I use the traditional implements. So sometimes it's quite difficult to get it all in. But one thing I have learned is that you don't actually need that much time to train. Okay? What is important is how that training is performed, that you're working at the right intensity, that you've got good work ethic, and also that you're connecting what you're training to your martial arts practice. Okay, so you've got to have this kind of connection. Now I used to spend hours and hours and hours training, but it wasn't connecting to my traditional karate practice. So there were two kind of separate entities, and I just found I was wasting a hell of a lot of time. Okay, once I realised the mistake of that and started to integrate it, all of a sudden I had a hell of a lot more spare time. Because for instance, when I'm lifting kettlebells, it feels like I'm practicing karate because I'm using the same dynamics. Okay, so this combination exercise is really good for those times where you haven't got much time to train. Okay, what I'm going to do is we're going to work a clean to start with. I'm going to use a double hip clean, so I'm going to use my hips. I'm going to shake the hips under the load of the kettlebell in order to challenge them to get that weight up into the rack position. Okay, now this is very similar to the way the karate uses its hips for striking. So again, I'm trying to relate to it as closely as possible. Then from that double hip clean, I'm going to go into a snatch. Then there's two dynamic lifts over with. Then I'm going to go grinding. So I'm going to lower down under control. I'm going to support, then go down into a nice deep squat. Come back up to the top of the squat. I'm going to go into a nice strict overhead press. Lower the weight down to a rack again. And then we're going to just do a hand-to-hand pass and then the same on the other side. Okay? So I'll show you the exercise and then I'll talk you through again at the end. So safe pick up. Okay, so there you have it. There's the combination exercise. So again, just to talk through it, we've got a double hip clean, really whipping with the hips to get into the rack position. Then from here we lower down, go into the snatch. Again, the snatch is working the whole of the body. So it's working that sequential delay, getting energy from the floor all the way up through the body, finally punching it out into the hand. Perfect for striking techniques, okay? Perfect for building those attributes you need for good, effective, powerful striking. Then we're going to start working on the grinding movements. So bringing down under control to the rack, working on the negative here. So under tension, right? So don't just drop this hand straight down. You want to be letting it come down under that resistance, nice and slow. Then we're going to go into a squat. Then at the end of the squat, make sure you're upright so you can get a good strict press. Okay. As you get more tired with this exercise, if you're choosing a weight that's going to be challenging to overhead press, then you might want to just do some variations on those. So one of them could be that you press at the top of your squat, so it becomes more like a thruster. Okay, so you're in this position here. I'm going to go into my squat. As I drive up from the top of the squat, that's going to help me push this kettlebell up, okay? So that's one option. And the other option is that you get to the rack position here, you get to the top of your squat, and then you re-dip again, and you either go into a push press or into a jerk, okay? There's just a couple of options you can run with. So the way to do this is set your timer for the time that you've got to train, okay? So if you've only got 15 minutes, do a quick joint mobility, make sure everything's safe. You know, you're going to do a little bit of a warm-up first. Set your timer for the 15 minutes, and then just do this for 15 minutes, okay? Do not drop the kettlebell. Try not to lower the kettlebell at all for the whole of that 15 minutes. So try to pace yourself. Remember that the overhead position and the rack position, you can rest if you need to. So rather than putting the weight down, try and hold in the rack so it's nice and you're in a nice comfortable position. Same on the overhead, okay? If you get your alignment correct, the overhead position and the rack position are quite comfortable to rest and hold that weight, okay? If you've got a little bit longer to go for, again, set your timer and then just go for it. Don't count the reps, just kind of get inside the exercise, absorb yourself into the exercise, and then just enjoy it, okay? Because it's really repetitive, you may think it's quite boring, but once your body starts to be more challenged with this exercise, it becomes quite tough. So it is far from boring, okay? It's very difficult sometimes, it's hard to get the mind focused all the way through to the end. But try your best. Remember your breathing, always keep a nice regular rhythm of breathing. That'll really help when you're sequencing the movement. And yeah, give it a go and see what you think.